Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner podcast. I'm Dylan, I'm your host, and today, guys, we are going to be talking about the rise of design build, how you can work better together, whether you're a contractor, engineer, whatever side of the table that you're on. We're going to help you with design build, and just know that it's going to be more and more popular as we go. Next thing we're going to talk about is getting your mind right, doing what you say you're going to do, and having somewhat of a is what it is mentality. I'll tell you what that means in this episode. And then on top of that, we're just going to talk about some of the things that have been going on. So Matt's still moving. He's getting a new HQ 2.1 built at his new house, all that kind of good stuff. Plus, he had an office move, which is pretty exciting. So just total moving. He decided to do it all at once, and as anybody that's ever moved, you kind of know that it's not a cut and dry thing. It happens over a period of time, and it kind of is what it is. For me, still in my same office, haven't moved, but looking forward to huge growth year. We're opening up more opportunities within Cowabunga Studios and all that kind of stuff. Still doing all the software development, improving Revit productivity, all that kind of good stuff. But we're also starting to take on and really go after some more engineering work. Just seeing a huge demand of it, and in particular, going after design build work. So, without further ado, go and talk about some of the things that I'm seeing within the design build world. Now, obviously, Matt lives this on a day to day basis. It is, how he's built his construction company and all that. And in a future episode, when Matt and I actually get a chance to sit down and talk together, we'll have way more to say about this. But for right now, the things that I can say about design build is really, I don't see this going anywhere. And if we look back in history, we're kind of just repeating the cycle. So when you look back in history, you see architect as master builder, right? They were the guys designing it, they were basically the general contractor, and then bringing in all the trades to execute their vision onto of what they had laid out and executing it and being that kind of site superintendent, general contractor, bringing everybody together. And that's, 100 years ago what architects did, more or less. Granted, we didn't have mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems in those buildings, right? They were basically just architecture and structure. Now, with all the systems that we have that go into the building, right? You mechanical, electrical, plumbing, um, low voltage, data, security, access control. Um, we just add a ton of systems into this. And then on top of that, the architectural changes that we've had over the years, right? Different materials. Same goes for structural as well, where the amount of glazing, the amount of glass, the amount of different materials that we can put into buildings and use. We're not just limited to stone and wood anymore. We have a lot of other options, and then we have like precast concrete to use in buildings. So if you look back 100 years, and then fast forward maybe to like 50 years ago, when mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems came in, this is where you kind of start to see a fracture in the industry. Now it's pretty obvious looking back, and I'm sure living it was a little different, right? So looking back, you could see that things kind of fractured a little more, where you had architecture and then you had all these subsystems of mechanical, electrical, plumbing, coming in and forming engineering departments within the architecture firms to design and build these systems. Then you had you always had architectural and structural engineering. Structural engineering over time has been more and more stringent, so that kind of became its own um, entity and discipline. And then you had on the contractor side, you went from general contractor and a few specialties to now um, you had a ton of more specialty contractors, right? Again, the rise of mechanical, electrical, plumbing contractors independently, and then you had all the other um, masonry, you had structures, you had steel, you had uh, landscape, site civil, everything, right? And that has kind of been the way that it's uh, been done for the last 50 years or so, where you had some design build here and there where it was an integrated team, but really not a whole lot that I could see going back through history. And then about maybe 15, 20 years ago, you started to see some of these. Um, Frankly, they're contract vehicles, right? You saw them with the rise of guarantee max price GMP contracts. You see some IPD, integrated project delivery. You see some PPP, public private partnership projects, and that kind of integrated delivery method for things. So it's got a few different names. And GMP, I've seen primarily it goes. Well, I've seen it both done both ways, as a design bid build concept, as well as design build, where from a design build standpoint, you're putting together, kind of pricing and design simultaneously. Like, here's the number for um, design, here's the number for execution, or here's basically a number for design slash engineering, here's the number for building. And with those two numbers, you kind of get to a GMP. You have like initial early budgetary pricing, and then as you move forward, you'll then have kind of final uh, guaranteed max price for the project. So a little bit hand in hand, and this can be, I mean, you can slice this so many different ways. And without repeating myself or making this so kind of just oblique, right? That you can't see anything past it, is design build projects can go a ton of different ways. Contracts can get set up a ton of different ways. There's a lot of ways to go about it. I don't think that there's really one solid way of doing it. Now, Matt's going to disagree and say his way is the best way, which is as he should. But I haven't seen anything come down from like DBIA and say this is the way you run it. This is the way that design build's meant to be. This is how we go about it. I think there's a lot of room for not just improvement but standardization across of it. But that's also part of the benefit of design build, is that you can run this however you kind of deem worthy, right? In some ways, so like for some design build projects, you're going to have um, you know basically the general contractor is going to hold all of the contracts. It's going to be one contract to the owner. So the owner is only going to have one ties to get this building done. The general contractor will then come together and they'll select an architect that'll be independent. Then they'll potentially either select their own structural engineer, or that comes through with the steel package, or it's going to be executed under the architect, right? The architect's going to go hire the structural engineer to put all of that together. And then for mechanical, electrical, plumbing, low voltage, site civil, all that kind of stuff, um, well, really, MEP is typically going to go then under the specialty contractors, right? It's going to go under the mechanical contractor is going to hire their own engineer. The electrical contractor is going to hire their own engineer. Um, Mechanical probably also has plumbing in house. If not, there's going to be someone else to sign off on the plumbing design and drawings. So those will be executed typically through the contractor. Then for site civil, typically that's going to be its own independent engineer, and then hire civil contractors from there. So again, can be executed a ton of ways, or the site civil contractor has their own in-house engineer, and then that gets executed through that contract. So again, it's trying to just condense the amount of contracts that are being held and signed, reducing that number, and again putting engineering up under each of the specialty contractors. Which the biggest benefit that I've seen in doing this and doing it directly to an electrical contractor, which makes it pretty interesting rather than being contracted to the owner, is that we can make a lot of decisions sooner in the project. The big ones are on pricing and availability, right? One set of gear, and electrical gear in particular, and this is what I'm going to make reference to because this is what I understand and know the best, is most all electrical gear, and I know manufacturers will disagree with me, but in my mind, they're pretty much the same, right? They're going to have to meet UL standards. They're going to have to meet listing criteria. and outside of like Federal Pacific, Color Hammer, Eaton, Square D, they're Siemens, GE. Those are pretty much all the same, right? Not no Federal Pacific. We don't allow that. That is a fire hazard, documented, known fire hazard. But for the main manufacturers, right? For GE, Siemens, Color Hammer, Square D, it's pretty much all the same gear, right? Same stuff, all good, right? Some has better things than others, and you can say that across the board. Um, I do have some preferences in there, but again, really it comes down to what's the pricing, what does the electrical contractor prefer to work with, which means it's going to be easier for their guys in the field to install it. They're going to work better with it. We'll get a better product because they're familiar with that gear, how it's built, constructed. Um, and then on top of that is availability, right? If let's just say that Color Hammer doesn't have availability, or their availability is out 50, 60 weeks, and we can shave, let's say, 20 weeks with Square D or vice versa, we're going to go with the other manufacturer. And that makes a decision really quick, really easy. And you could do that on the front side of the project versus waiting for, let's say, design, bid, build, where, it takes the design team however many months to get through design, then we go to bid, and then in the bidding phase, right, we have to go through substitutions, what we're going to accept, what we're going to reject, what's equal, what's not, reviews all the time to do a review, to make different choices, and that's going to just extend timelines, right? It's good for the owner in some ways, in that um, they're going to get numbers that are pretty even, right? They can clearly scope a project, right? When they have construction documents, scoping a project is going to be a lot easier, meaning that everybody on the street is bidding the same exact thing, versus what you have in design build, where like, hey, here's a box, give me a price, right? Like whatever you need to make your best guess and estimate as to what's going in here. You know how these things go. You're going to price it for me, and this creates a huge variety of pricing out on the street, because one contractor is going to include everything that you need, and their price is going to be higher because it's including everything you need. Other contractors just don't know, right? They don't have the experience to go through it. And so this means that they then are going to have more difficulties in pricing the project and dealing with it, and moving from there. So, big thing here, realistically, in being able to move forward is, um, one, putting trust, in who you're working with and going back and forth on it. Two is, um, the more trust that you have in, for basically, this goes to an owner, right? The more trust an owner has in their contractors and who they're working with, the more you can do design build, because inherently there's just a lot of trust that goes into those types of projects, where contractors are making design decisions, they're making installation decisions, they're doing a lot of kind of autonomous decision making, that you have to have trust in that they're going to make the right choices, do the right decisions to get this project what you want at the end, right? And so the less trust you have, and then also the more transparency that you need on a project, is going to be inherent to everything that's going on, right? So the more you have trust, the more you can do design build. The less you have trust, you're going to have to put a full set of construction documents so that everything is documented, everything is transparent, especially on public projects where you need three bids. They're going to have to be fully scoped, all that kind of stuff. And then there's just not as, there needs to be transparency there. And then there's some trust, which is more why those projects end up going design, bid, build. We're seeing some more go to a, where you need three bids, three proposals, all that kind of stuff, is the general contractors are going to go with their chosen design team and contractors to present to the owners and do the whole dog and pony show of presentations. And they're going to do that, and so that the owner can say that they got three bids, and do that up front, for that through the general contractors, who have the design teams under them. And again, one contract then from owner to contractor, and then the contractors take care of everything else. So there's some of that kind of workaround that's out there. Not as much. Most all of the design build work is on private projects, so not any government buildings, not typically schools, even though we see some of that, and especially obviously private schools can do that, but not public institutions. You're seeing some of it in private institutions for higher education, and then obviously like manufacturing and all that kind of stuff is pretty easy rise for design build. And again, everybody being contracted up through the general contractor, and then executed from there. A lot more trust, typically like Matt will say is he's been working with especially contractors for years. There's a lot of trust with those guys. They're a cohesive team by and large, and that creates a lot of trust, which creates a lot of autonomy, which means that they're going to do a good job, which is why, to my next point, is doing what you say and delivering on what you say you're going to do is huge. Really, you have all the opportunity in the world in this industry in construction, but you have one chance to lose it. And what I mean by that is you can do everything right for a very long time, and one uh, massive screw up will ruin your entire reputation. Warren Buffett has an awesome quote around this and saying that your reputation takes a lifetime to build and a moment to lose, right? Doing something that is totally out of character, totally outside of who you are, totally outside of that will ruin relationships, it'll ruin trust, it'll do a lot of bad things, which is why if you're heated, if you're emotional, if you're not in a right state of mind, don't have those conversations. Sleep on it. It can wait a day. Write it out. Do it in a way that you're not going to accidentally hit send on that email. Like put it in a separate document, all that kind of good stuff. Write it out longhand. Go and talk to somebody. Do all those things so that you don't say or do something that you're going to regret later that will ruin your reputation. So, getting your mind right around like doing what you say, and following through on those actions is huge. This is why, like Matt and I will talk about 75 hard and following through on that. Honestly, like yesterday was a very tough day for me mentally, but because I'm on 75 hard, I didn't compound the problem and make it worse, right? I didn't end up drinking a ton. Really, I didn't drink at all is the point, right? I didn't compound the problem and make it worse. And then today, waking up feeling much better, doing a lot of mental exercises, getting my mind right, and it helps to, again, I didn't say anything that I regret. I didn't go down a hole that because of the emotional toll that I had yesterday, it's not going to ripple into the future, right? It stays there. It's not going to cause any ill harm, ill will, nothing like that. And so I took the evening to not do or say anything that I'm going to regret down the road, and I did not compound the problem. So the other side of this is really in pricing. So pricing has been fairly consistent for before 2020 for 10 years. And so we didn't have too many pricing adjustments that we made along the way. Now, in the contracting world, prices are always fluctuating, that kind of stuff. But on the whole, things were made fairly consistent, right? You had a couple percent increase here and there, but nothing like we saw in 2020, 21, 22, and even 23. I mean, you just saw over those 4 years, really massive price adjustments, price swings, availability. It got crazy, and so because of that, prices have adjusted up fairly significantly. And while the market might not be fully adjusted to a lot of this, in our hourly rates, in our cost of doing business, we really haven't had those increases baked into a lot of what we do. And so, one is, I mean, you've got to increase prices in what you're doing. Two, it's also having kind of an is what it is attitude. Like, hey, for a project recently that I quoted is like, I did it a few different ways, and it's like I still keep coming up with this thing being like 1,200 hours of design work for just electrical. And so, gave him a price around that, and it's like, yeah, man, this is what it is. Like, this is um, what I see it is. Like, I don't know how to get anything out of this, right? Like, this is what it's going to take time wise to execute on this project. So, we've got to act accordingly around it. And with that, like, it's a big ordeal to do it. Now, I could be totally wrong in it, and we'll deal with that then. um, but this is what I see for the information that we've been given, for the amount of time that I'm going to have to put into this, for the amount of people that we're going to have to bring on to do it. Like, this is a big undertaking, a massive project. Like, you know it's kind of is what it is. So, having that mentality, like, even though it's maybe a bigger price, a bigger number than maybe you're comfortable with personally, you kind of have to get over that and through it. I'm still learning and going through it, which is why I'm sharing it here with you guys. Like, some of this stuff is in real time, or pretty close to it, and documenting my journey through this, right? And putting out bigger quotes, bigger proposals for bigger projects. And some people might balk at it, others are, and actually, this was from one of the contractors, is, well, it is what it is. And so that mentality really helped me to be just more confident in what I know it's going to take to execute and do this project at a very high level, and so that they're happy with it. The owner's happy with it, the contractors are happy with it, right? Like, there's no questions when those guys get in the field to start executing the project. Like, all of that information is there. We've well documented it, we've coordinated, like, everything is as it needs to be on the project. And so I can't, shortchange myself, the project. It's having that kind of is what it is mentality around, like, hey, man, this is what it's going to take us to do the project, to execute it. You're paying for our knowledge, our experience, our expertise, and that's really, like, for both sides of the fence, right? On the engineering side, like, our overhead is pretty locked and consistent, from office space and software and computers and utilities and all the normal overhead that contractors carry as well for their office, and those people, right? And salaries and all that kind of good stuff. And then on the contractor side, you guys have so many more variable costs and materials and shelling out money and cash flow things to deal with than we do on the design side. But again, you're getting, both sides are getting paid for their experience, their expertise, their knowledge, their ability to execute, and doing what they say they're going to do, right? Showing up on time is a big deal these days, guys. So I think that in wrapping this up and kind of pulling this to a T, is that design build is here to stay. I see more and more projects going that way. Now, if you're just doing institutional stuff, um, you're going to really see it not change a whole lot. Hospitals are going to continue. If you're contracted directly to a hospital because of all their requirements, you're going to see them stay with a design, bid, build attitude. Really, contractors are going to be in there and doing pricing throughout, kind of traditionally how we've done it. So you're going to see that stay. I think higher education, for the most part, is going to stay on that side of it, except for like off campus pieces that'll go to like public private partnership type of stuff, or IPD projects. So you'll see some there, but on campus, it'll I would tend to lean towards it staying as a design, bid, build type project. All public works projects, schools, uh, any government building, libraries, prisons, all that kind of stuff. Well, I say prisons, but that should be like publicly owned, not privately owned prisons. And then for any, firehouses, police stations, EMS, anything like that that's in the public sector, is going to stay as a design, bid, build project. There's really no way around that, for their requirements and by law, to what they need for transparency and all that kind of stuff, even bidding, equal bidding, yada yada. So, um, design build isn't going away. Get your mind right around, do what you say you're going to do, having an is what it is mentality. And more so, guys, here in 2024, it's super important to just be a person of integrity. In construction, we've got a mainly from the residential side, but I think it stems, through most of the industry. You can't do this too long in commercial. You can get away with it longer in residential, but um, at the end of the day, like, you got to live by your word. Reputation is everything in this industry. It's a huge deal. So make sure that you're doing your part to live up to what you say you're going to do, and just be a person of integrity. Huge deal. Lastly, thank you guys so much for listening. Matt and I appreciate it, and we look forward to having a great 2024 with all of you. Um, and as we proceed through this year, you'll see, what I'm doing to build an engineering firm from the ground up, how we're going to use software to automate a lot of processes that we've built, and then build out everything from there. So I'll kind of document the lessons that I learn along the way. And again, thank you guys so much for listening. And until next time.